Postament pi irrelevant, Vansaleva Vandu Spring or 2021. Marcus opened an email from his chip supplier and read it 3 times before it made sense. The part in question was a small motor control chip, 50 cents, the kind nobody ever thinks about. For 2 years the lead time on that chip had been about 12 weeks. Odd wait through. This email said 52 weeks, a full year, for a 50-cent chip. P acting muk po postament mena filp Philadelphia per bay filp filad. Small company P acting muk Philadelphia nes filp pfpf Philip alphan. Building philadnism philpo. Under porete P Philadelphian Fioniantini teen patali that turned regular bikes into e-bikes. Por ella por Vyasilava MLA years earlier, it was him and one employee. By 2021, pandemic-era bike demand had pushed it to 40 people on payroll. E-bike demand exploded so fast the pandemic that waitlists were the industry norm, not something unique to his company. Every single kit needed that one motor control chip. No chip, no kit. No kit, no revenue, no payroll. P more Shamil 100 orders sitting in his inbox and, as or that Pierre Clois thermal, Poretlo Clinton Jean Pi Happy wait to fill them.
If you've ever had one part hold up an entire project, you already know exactly the feeling in his stomach right now.
There's closed peep post a Poretl filled. Cars sitting on lots with no computer chips inside them. Empty dealership lots. Balash P postament pi irrelevant, Vansaleva 1 minutes. Graphics cards listed for double their sticker price. And around 2023, most about it. Prices came down. Cars showed UP on lots again. So the story wrapped up neatly in most people's heads. Pandemic broke the supply chain, chip makers built more, problem solved. Here's the thing nobody's saying loudly enough, that's only half true, and the half that's more expensive half. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what happened to Marcus Palashi release of Mercuriki Ririkiki Rikli Orkliunia Poshianj Wokpi Sahising Washanti kind of panic is quietly building again for a completely different. And the strange part is, the chip driving that next version of this problem isn't rare or exotic. Palashi release of Mercuriki Ririkiki Rikli or Philadelphian Pifa and Jert Philpis Philip Pif. The boring one. The one nobody wants to build new factories for. Holographiakite larking Michelle up Philand Philanrol Pisahoyane su Philadelphian Wesu SVSU Philand. With me, because that sinky piece don't see more sense in about 10 minutes and it changes how you think about literally anything you own that plugs in. Por ella por Vyasilava Philadelphian Philankula know any of that yet. In the spring of 2021, all he knew was a warehouse full of half-built kits and a supplier tell him to get in line behind everyone else on earth. So he did what most small manufacturers did that year, called around. Distributors, brokers, anyone who might have that chip sitting somewhere, anywhere. Ostavar pi arilla phil and him, at dollars each. Pierre Clois thermal p acting mukam philafother avayamar kyathavetsaleva 50 cents, $8. A 16 times markup, because scarcity makes almost anything possible on the spot market. He bought some anyway because payroll doesn't wait ply itself out. That single decision cost him more than his entire profit margin on. He was losing money just to keep the doors open. Quick question for you, pi cent par dollars, or I recognize that as the same shortage as no cars. Most wouldn't, and that, p morshtavan about. 2 on Marcus S chip disappeared and about p acting mukampara than 2021, to the exact week the world panicked. Rewind to March 2020, Pierre post Philadelphian Philad. Streets sales forecasts and did the one Pierre P acting mukampara that seemed responsible. They cancelled their chip orders. Not delayed, cancelled. Ford, GM, Volkswagen, every major carmaker told their chip suppliers to stop the line, because nobody was buying cars. That single decision is the hinge this entire story turns on, so hold on to it. Chip factories, the fabs, don't work like a warehouse you reopen with a phone call. We'll get into exactly why in a minute, but for now, understand this: once a carmaker cancels, that capacity doesn't sit around waiting. Palashi release of Mercuriki Ririkiki or Plirniakilach versing Lansinaisi Zerfa and Jutsufotrojika happened at full speed. Everyone on Earth got sent home. Home-end laptops, webcams, home routers, extra monitors, gaming consoles, quick or nowhere to go and money they won restaurants or flights. Pia porep Philadelphia or Philadelphian Fiani Space Sorak Pia Philpi Sharon Taisvari. Electronics chip dip during the pandemic. It spiked hard in and fast postumia nights a poke postumenant menalme. Were cancelling? It did what does where does when one customer peer cup p acti Philadelphia if they filled that capacity with the new customer. Conso. Post p app fill potresiu prin po filavans. 6 months later in late 2020, car sales pick faster than almost anyone. And peer Clois thermal pi sahising Paschim Philadelphia Nesabi Nozash in Ambikistani Patali Agraki Philadelphia of orders. Pimorsham Philafoth Philadelphian Philip Piep Piso Philophone Ataphonatinutthe anymore. Someone else was standing in it. This is the part most explanations skip, and it's that actually matters. Fab capacity gets booked out in advance, sometimes a year or more on committed schedule. When you cancel, you don't get button. You get moved to the back of a line that's all info will you were gone. Automakers went from we don't need chips right and immediately in about 2 quarters. Fabs don't turn around that fast. Ask yourself if you cancelled your table at a packed restaurant. Close to poor meal that conversation goes. That's roughly had with chip fabs in early 2021. Add one more twist, cars need more chips than they use. Palashi release of Mercury po Philadelphia Nesafernatinia Philadelphian Firan. A car today isn't just an engine and a radio. Pier Clois thermal pisa hissing Paschimi of a Filani Shilinkala Vansui's computer. Braking systems, infotainment, power steering, dozens of sensors, way more chips per vehicle than a decade earlier. So automakers came back to the line needing more chips than before, at the worst possible moment to ask for them. That's the whiplash. Cancel day get shoved to the back of the boom, and need more chips than ever once you're finally there. Marcus's 50-cent motor-controlled chip and Ford aren't even that different, often the same category of older, cheaper manufacturing process competing for the same limited slots. Postumir Nights of Icona raises underneath all of this. The one Quabridge waved past, why couldn't the industry just build more capacity and make the whole problem? The answer is the part almost once Pimorshambar Mape Filan Qualters of Mercury Qua get it. The rest of this story in why it's again right now makes complete sense. Here's the thing about a chip factory, a fab, it might be the single most expensive, most specialized building humans construct. A modern leading-edge fab can cost upward of $10 to $20 billion just to build, before it ever makes one working chip. It takes years to construct and it's precise enough that a truck driving too heavily outside post-eminent Maitana. We make most of the world's advanced chips, TSMC in Taiwan and Samsung in South Korea. A handful of others, like Intel and GlobalFoundries, fill in the rest. When people picture the chip shortage, they usually picture one giant factory. There isn't one. There are dozens of different process nodes, essentially different generations of manufacturing lines, and they are not interchangeable. A cutting-edge line built for a phone's main processor cannot just start pumping out 50-cent motor-controlled chips instead. It's like asking a Formula One shop to build tractors. Different tools, different tolerances, different everything. This matters because Marcus S. chip, inside cars, appliances, and industrial equipment come from what the industry calls mature or legacy nodes. Older processors, sometimes 10, 15, even 20 years old, that are simple, reliable, and cheap to make. Cheap for the customer, for the pharmacy stuff. Here's the part that explains everything else in this video. Building a new fab, or meaningfully expanding an old one, takes 2 to 4 years at minimum, often longer. So in 2021, when more chips, the honest answer was, sure, in about 3 years. In the meantime, existing fabs did the only thing that made financial sense. Their customer paid the most per chip. Guess who pays more per chip? A laptop maker buying advanced processors, or an automaker buying 50-cent legacy chips? It's not close. The high-margin, advanced stuff gets priority almost automatically, because that's what keeps a fab profitable. Pause for a second and actually sit with this. An industry can be shipping record numbers of chips and posting record profits, while the specific chip you need stays scarce for years. Both are true at once. That's the trap almost every shortage is over headline missed. Lega less profitable per unit, so they get less investment, less new capacity, and lower priority whenever a fab has to choose who gets served first. That's true in a normal year. In a chaotic year like 2021, with the whiplash from Chapter 2 piling every customer into the same queue at once, it got a lot worse. So car makers weren't just waiting behind laptop makers. They were waiting behind laptop makers, on production lines that were never the fab's most profitable priority to expand in the first place. That's the mechanical reason the 2021 shortage happened, and honestly that part is well understood now. Business schools use it as a case study. For postament mightn't happened after, because everyone assumed once the queue cleared, the underlying problem, legacy chips being a low priority, cleared with it. It didn't. And that's exactly where Marcus' story picks back up, because by 2022, the headlines started to shift. Chip shortage easing. Postamir Lavaikana Thana Thazona Thiatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatanatana genuinely true. For a specific slice of the chip world, consumer electronics demand cooled off hard once people stopped buying laptops and monitors for a home office and went back outside. Fabs that had been slammed making advanced chips suddenly had spare capacity. Some chip makers even reported a glut, too much advanced node supply, not too little. That's a real, documented swing, and it's the reason your next graphics card or phone probably won't cost double what it should. Genuinely good news, as far as it goes. Paleshi release of Mercury Kirikli or Clearniakilach Versinglansinaici Philadelphia Chinuthin Pistonda Vansuevan Ombe Pevarch Kmitra Lalonzir Philoforeverted Serverted Serifa and Yudavragarsin. Read those. Marcus read those same headlines. By early 2023, his suppliers quoted lead time on the motor control chip had dropped from 52 weeks to somewhere around 20. Better? Not great but better. He restocked, rebuilt his inventory buffer and figured the worst was permanently behind him. Late 2023, he tried to place a bigger order because e-bike demand was still strong and he wanted to expand his product line. The lead time had crept back up, not to 52 weeks, but not to the old 12-week normal either. It hovered stubbornly around 30 weeks and stayed there. Quick one for the comments while this is fresh. If you work anywhere near manufacturing or procurement, has your lead time on some boring, unglamorous part actually gone back to its pre-2020 normal, or is it still stuck somewhere worse? Drop the part and the wait time below. I want to see how widespread this still is. Here's a question worth sitting with. If the chip shortage is over, why did a boring 50-cent chip never actually go back to its old lead time? The honest answer is that the general shortage, one caused by the pandemic Whiplash, mostly did resolve. What didn't resolve is the ma underneath it. Remember Chapter 3. Legacy chips were always a low for fab investment. Pimop, Parasai Phil Puff Philifo S an ounce Gramin. Remember Chapter 3. Legacy chips were always a lower priority for fab investment because they're low margin. That fact didn't change just because consumer electronics demand cooled off. If anything, it got worse, because something new started eating the exact same kind of factory capacity Marcus depends on. We'll get to exactly what that is in the next chapter, and it's the real reason this is. But first, notice something about how this story usually gets told. Reporters love a clean before and after shortage, then resolution. Empty lots, then full lots. Nobody writes a headline that says a SPUC category of chips remains structurally undersupplied for reasons that will take a decade to fix. That doesn't get por alapor via singlu accent acute. So the story quietly ended in the news, while it kept going, at a lower boil, for people like Marcus. If you're the kind of person who wants the story under the story and not just the headline version, that's whole reason I make videos like this one. Because the next part of Marcus' story is where this gets genuinely strange, involving an industry that 3 years ago barely used the same factories at all. In 2023, the fast customer at the world's most wasn't a phone brand, it were companies like Nvidia and the hyperscalers buying its chips. Microsoft Poreviasilach Silva Silda Amazon Meta needed of advanced processors to train and run AI models. These aren't the cheap, boring Marcus needs. They're the most advanced, most X that exist, built on the newest manufacturing processes TSMC has. And AI comp. They were pre-booking years of future character capacity, in advance whatever price it took to secure the slot. Think about what that does to a fab's priorities. Remember the rule from Chapter 3, whoever pays the most per chip gets served first. AI chips are, by wide margin, some of the highest margin products a fab can produce right now. Nothing else comes close. So the newest, most advanced production lines get committed to AI customers years out, which sounds like it shouldn't touch Marcus' 50-cent chip at all. Different node, different factory, right? Here's the part that surprised even people inside about the chip itself. It's about everything wrapped around making an advanced AI chip usable. Advanced called advanced packaging, a process that stacks, couple chips together into one finished unit. That packaging capacity is limited and specialized, and it shares engineers' equipment and materials with other parts of the chip-making world. When demand for advanced packaging exploded almost or declines, specialized equipment and raw materials toward the most profitable side of the business. Add a second pressure on top of that geopolitics. A large majority of the most in the world are made on the island Untitled English. That concentration, reasons. What happens if a conflict, a blockade, or a natural disaster interrupts the one place making the chips modern life depends on? So the US, through Palashi really pushed Poram Philadelphia USVSYMPA. Japan started funding new fabs on American, European and Japanese soil. That sounds like exactly the fix this story need. Dive where chips get made, ease the bottleneck done. For 2 to 4 years minimum, often pin extra pot fill Poramil running at full, reliable output. The new fabs going up in Arizona, in Japan and Germany, they're real, they're under construction and most are still years away from meaningful, high-volume output. On top of construction time export controls between the US and China, restricting which advanced chip technology can be sold where added a second layer of disruption. Companies rerouted supply chains and built redundant factories across multiple countries, caught on the wrong side of a new rule. And all polographic locking Michelle of Mercury Quampatharojush Philadelphia off that costs money and capacity that could have gone toward simply making more chips faster. None of that is a conspiracy or any single company's fault. It's four things stacking on each other: AI demand, a packaging bottleneck, a multi-year fab timeline and geopolitical hedging, all at once. So here's the question worth pausing on: if the industry's newest money, newest factories, and newest talent are all racing toward AI chips, who's left prioritizing Marcus' 50-cent motor control chip? The honest answer is close to nobody, at least not with any urgency. That's the math for 3, just with a much bigger, much shinier competitor for capacity than a gaming laptop ever was. Which brings us to video I think matters most, the part almost nobody's saying clearly out loud. Here's the turn, the thing that makes this story papistontaventu versing poiling the sequel. In 2021, the shortage was a traffic jam. Too many customers showing up in the same lane at the same moment after a whiplash nobody planned for. Traffic jar. Given enough time, that kind peer pluis thermal pisa hissing pashchimi afriki rendinavian leoni. What's happening to Marcus' chip now isn't a traffic jam. It's closer to a road that's slowly permanently being narrowed, while more cars keep merging onto it. Think about who actually wants mature node chips, the older manufacturing processes going forward. Cars obviously, and cars now need more chips per vehicle every year, not fewer, especially as more of them go electric. Electric vehicles use notably more chips than gas cars for battery management, power conversion, motor control, HT the category Marcus' product lives in. Add appliances, add industrial equipment getting smart, sensors added to everything from factory machines to water heaters. Add solar inverters, add basic connected devices everywhere. All of that demand growth is happening on mature nodes. All of that demand growth is happening. The boring, cheap, reliable chips. Demand for that category isn't shrinking. It's climbing steadily every year. Now think about supply. Who is building brand new factories dedicated to 20-year-old manufacturing processes? Almost nobody, because it doesn't make financial sense. Why would a company spend billions building a fab for the least profitable category of chip, when the same billions building an advanced fab can chase the AI boom instead? So you get demand for legacy chips quietly rising year over year while dedicated new supply for legacy chips barely grows at all. Tier Cluis Thermal Pisa Hissing Pashchimi Afriki Rendinavian Leone equipment making Marcus S chip right now is genuinely running on AIM generation that meaningfully expanded just kept alive. That is a structurally different problem than 2021's traffic jam, and it doesn't resolve itself just because time passes. It's the reason Marcus S lead time never fully went back to 12 weeks, not because of leftover pandemic chaos, but because the underlying priority never actually changed. In late 2024, Marcus noticed something that made this click for him. His chips list price hadn't spiked again, but his supplier quietly added a minimum order quantity clause and started requiring orders further and further in advance to guarantee a slot. No panic headline. No dramatic price spike. Just a slow tightening, the kind that never makes the news, but that changes how you have to run a business. That's the part almost nobody's talking about. Not is there a chip shortage, which sounds solved, but is there enough investment Pierre Clois Thermal Pisa Hissing Pashchimi Afriki Rendinavian Leone underneath almost everything we build? Honestly not yet. Pause and actually think about Paleshi release of Mercury Kirikikirikli or Plirniakilach Versinglansi Nisi Phil Philadelphian Wumjan / uppercase FNYO. Every dollar of new fab investment chasing AI is a rational, defensible business decision, and every one odd quietly leaves the boring chip market a little further behind. Nobody did anything wrong and the outcome is still a real problem. That gap doesn't show up as an empty car lot. It shows up as a small manufacturer like Marcus having to plan a year in advance for a part that used to take 12 weeks, with no dramatic news story attached to explain why.
Which raises the only question that actually matters. Whether you run a business or just want to understand what you are buying, what do you actually do about a shortage that never fully ends and never makes headlines?
That's exactly where Marcus and this video land next. Marcus actually do. Once he understood this wasn't a temporary problem he could just wait out. First, he stopped treating that one chip as a single source part. He spent 3 months qualifying a second, functionally equivalent, Poshianj manufacturer even though it meant redesigning part of his circuit board. That's not free. P. more shamil him engineering time and a modest redesign, but it meant one supplier's tightening lead time couldn't take his whole company down again. Second, he changed how far ahead he plans. Instead of ordering to match rolling 12 or 20-week demand, he now commits to orders roughly a year out, treating long lead times as the new normal, not a temporary spike. Third, and this one surprised him, he started paying attention to who else uses his exact category of chip. Other industries entirely. Because if EV makers, appliance makers, equipment makers are all quietly competing for the same aging manufacturing lines he depends on, watching their demand tells him more about his own risk than watching his own sales numbers does. None of that solved the und. Legacy chip supply is still structurally behind legacy chip demand, and that's an industry-wide gap, not something one small company fixes on its own. But it meant Marcus Pierpachum dollar to Marchiati Vandai Puglioni. He builds a play around a shortage that fully goes p more pieced post-post-a-focote waiting for a headline that tells him it's finally over. If you build anything with hardware in it or you're buying a car, an appliance, or industrial equipment in the next few years, this lesson generalizes directly to you. Long lead times on the unglamorous chips are quietly becoming the normal condition, not the emergency exception. Plan like it, especially if your business depends on one. If you don't build hardware, here's what it means for you. Expect this to keep showing up as sneaky price creep and occasional availability gaps on boring stuff, appliances, cars, anything with a basic sensor in it. Not headline drama, just a quieter tax on ordinary things. That comment question from a few minutes ago is the whole point really. This isn't just Marcus' story. It's happening in slow motion across a lot of unglamorous supply chains right now, and most of them never make the news. Palashi release of Mercury Kirikli Orpli Uniakilach versing Glansinaisias, the Pistondinavian recap because there's a lot packed into this one. 2020, automakers cancelled chip orders during the crash. Consumer electronics demand spiked at the exact say time and filled that capacity instead. 2021, automakers came back needing more chips than ever and got stuck at the back of a line that hadn't existed a year earlier. That's the shortage everyone remembers. 2022 to 2023, consumer electronics or advanced chips are completely reported the general shortage easing. But mature-node chips, the cheap, unglamour cars appliances, and Marcus' e-bike kits, never got the investment to fully catch up, because they were always the lowest priority for fab capacity. Holographiakite locking Michelle of Mercury Quampotaro Philadelphia of Mercury quote on a teeny Vansilot sign Vansilifaforthi. Exploded absorbing the newest factories, the newest advanced packaging capacity, and the industry's fastest growing investment, leaving even less attention for the boring chips underneath everything else. Add years-long timelines for new fabs and geopolitical hedging pulling resources in multiple directions, and you get a shortage that isn't anymore but never actually finished. That's the real answer to why it's not over. No P on the specific thing that wasn't the thing Marcus or most of the physical world actual needed. Marcus's company is fine today, genuinely fine, kits shipping, payroll made, no more panicked spot market purchases at 16 times the price. Before waiting for the story to end and started planning for a chip market that stays tight in one specific category, quietly indefinitely. D'actual le underneath, P. Morshambar Mekans Lumbor Umanokamp High Philadelphia of whole video, it got quieter and it moved to the parts of the supply chain nobody writes headlines about. Kia post be acting Mokampara kind of story you want more of. Underneath the headline, everyone already forgot about. That's genuinely the whole channel, so subscribing means you catch the next one when it drops. Next week, I'm going deeper into the AI side of this, exactly how much of the world's advanced chip capacity is now committed to AI company years in advance, and what that quietly does to everyone else standing in line behind them. Marcus still can't get that 50-cent chip in 12 weeks, probably never again. But now, for the first time since 2021, that can blindside him.